The wheels hit the pavement hard. Not from use, from disrespect. A black man in his 70s lay on the sidewalk, face pressed to concrete. His wheelchair? Gone. Laughing. Two teenage boys, white, hoodie-clad, sneakers scuffed from a life of too much privilege and too little consequence, spun in circles like it was a carnival ride. "Look at me, I'm Captain Cripple," one yelled. The other pushed faster, filming the moment. A few people looked. No one stepped in. The man didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just closed his eyes and waited for it to stop. But 30 feet away, leaning against a tree, dressed in plain jeans and a black jacket, stood a man who didn't move either. He didn't run to help. He didn't shout. He watched every second, because the man on the ground was his father, and the man watching was Commander Langston Ford, head of the United States Armed Forces Joint Training Unit. A man who didn't need to yell to command fear. A man who built soldiers from raw boys. That afternoon, 2 names were filed into a system they didn't know existed. And a week later, those boys weren't in school anymore. They were in uniform, and they were about to learn. You don't just disrespect a veteran. You enlist in a war you're not ready for. Drop a comment if you've ever seen this happen in silence. Like, if someone you love deserved better. Share, because this time there will be consequences. The park opened at 6 a.m. sharp. By 6:17, the wheels of Mr. Elijah Ford's chair were already rolling across the uneven path. He came every morning. Same flannel shirt. Same folded veteran's cap tucked into the side pouch. Same motion, slow, steady, pushing himself along with scarred hands and a shoulder that hadn't worked right since 1986. Most people passed him without a glance. Just another old man with nowhere to go. They didn't see the bronze star on his vest. Didn't see the tiny tattoo on his wrist. A string of numbers coordinates Vietnam. Didn't know he once carried his best friend 3 miles under gunfire while his own leg was shattered from the hip down. Didn't care that he hadn't missed a voting day in 50 years. Didn't ask why he always wheeled through the park alone. They just walked past. And that morning, so did Tyler Carr and Josh Milner. 17 and 18. Expelled twice. Community service twice. But nothing had stuck. They weren't bad kids, some said. They were just bored, privileged, and completely untethered. Tyler wore a hoodie that read, "Sarcasm is my cardio." Josh filmed everything on his phone, hoping for the next clip to go viral. And when they saw Elijah, they grinned, like they'd spotted prey. "Yo, check this dude out," Josh whispered. "Damn, that chair looks like it's from the Civil War," Tyler laughed. Elijah didn't look at them. Didn't need to. He'd heard it all before. "Bet I can push him faster than he's moved all year," Tyler smirked. "Do it," Josh said, already recording. Tyler stepped in front. Elijah stopped. Still didn't speak. Tyler leaned in. "Hey, Pops, that thing got nitro." No reply. Just the wind brushing against his folded cap. Tyler leaned down. "Tell you what, why don't we give you a break?" And before Elijah could react, the boy grabbed the chair's handles and yanked. Hard. Elijah fell sideways, hitting the ground with a grunt. Not a scream. Not a plea. Just a breath knocked out of lungs that had once inhaled tear gas and jungle rot. Tyler spun the chair in a circle. Josh filmed, laughing. "Dude, this is gold. TikTok's gonna eat this up." Elijah lay on the ground, eyes closed, not unconscious, just still, like a man trained to survive by waiting. Because he had been. Across the park, under an old tree, sat a man in a black jacket and dark jeans. Watching. He didn't run, didn't shout. He just stood, slow and deliberate, walked toward the boys, but not fast, not threatening, just present, and unshakably composed. The kind of calm that makes your stomach twist before your brain understands why. The boys didn't notice him until he was 6 feet away. Then 5. Then, "Hey." Josh spun. Tyler paused mid-spin. The man spoke. "Pick. Him. Up." The boys blinked. Tyler chuckled nervously. "Who the hell are you, man?" The man didn't answer. He stepped past them, kneeled next to Elijah, whispered, "You okay, Dad?" Elijah opened his eyes. Didn't even scuff the good side. The man smiled, just barely, then turned to the boys. No rage in his eyes, just order. You have 10 seconds. To do what? Tyler asked, backing up. To make the only decision you'll get this week. Josh tried to laugh. This some kind of prank? The man reached into his back pocket, pulled out a badge. No city emblem, no police seal, just a black matte square with gold initials. U.S. Joint Command, Operations Integrity Unit, Commander L. Ford. Josh dropped the phone. Tyler swallowed. You got a choice, the man said. Pick him up and apologize. Right now. Or... He let the silence hang. It wasn't a threat. It was a sentence, waiting for them to finish it themselves. They picked Elijah up, placed him gently back in the chair, stammered apologies. Elijah said nothing. Commander Ford looked at them once more. Leave. They did. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. 3 days later, a notice arrived at both their schools. Expulsion due to egregious misconduct violating community safety policy. Attached was a recommendation. Both individuals are suitable for disciplinary enrollment under federal contract program. Civic Reintegration Initiative, Tier 4. Neither Tyler nor Josh understood what that meant, until 2 black SUVs showed up outside their homes. No sirens, just silence, and a clipboard that read, "You're being reassigned." They weren't arrested. They weren't sent to juvie. They were put in government vans, told to pack exactly 1 bag, and taken to a facility with no signs. Just a gate, and on that gate, a single line of words. We break. What breaks people? Inside, uniforms were handed out. Barber clippers buzzed. Names were replaced with numbers. Beds were concrete slabs with wool blankets. And the first voice they heard in that facility, it wasn't a drill sergeant. It wasn't a counselor. It was him, Commander Ford, standing at the front of the drill field. Same jacket, same stillness. And this time, he spoke into a mic that didn't amplify his voice. It narrowed the world to it. You mocked a man who spent his life defending yours. You played with his pain like it was sport. You thought you were too young to be accountable. A pause. You were wrong. Behind him, 20 more recruits stood silent, watching. Not new, not amused. These were kids who'd already learned what pain looks like without filters. Commander Ford pointed at Tyler and Josh. You're not soldiers. You're not even men yet. But by the time I'm done, you'll either be useful or unrecognizable. No one clapped. No one jeered. Just silence. And 2 boys who realized for the first time in their lives that they had nowhere left to run. The van stopped. Doors opened. Tyler and Josh squinted into the desert sun. Barbed wire fence. Concrete towers. A compound too clean to be prison, too empty to be school. A small metal sign read, Unit 12 Reintegration Initiative South Base. A soldier with no rank badge stepped forward. You speak when spoken to. You run when told. You stand when you're tired. They were handed gray jumpsuits, stiff boots, clipboards, no phones, no mirrors, no first names. Josh raised his hand. Where exactly are we? The soldier didn't answer. He just pointed to a banner above the gate. We don't care who you were. We care who shows up. Inside, no one smiled. The air smelled like concrete and bleach. Their first bunk was a cinder block room with 8 metal beds, all identical. No lockers, no windows. A man stood at the front. Shaved head, sharp eyes, broad shoulders. He introduced himself as Staff Sergeant Duke. He didn't yell. He stated, your lives as you knew them are over. You're here because you forgot how to be human. Now, you learn how to be something better, or you'll break trying. He pointed at the ground. You sleep here. You eat what's given. You run before the sun rises. You clean until it shines. If you want mercy, pray. If you want freedom, earn it. Tyler tried to scoff. Josh elbowed him. Shut up, man. Tyler didn't. That night, they were woken at 3:42 a.m. Not by alarm, by a bucket of ice water. Outside, in 40-degree air, the boys were lined up. They weren't alone. Other recruits stood beside them, some 15, some 19. Most looked tired, some looked broken. Staff Sergeant Duke walked the line. This is the price of disrespect. He pointed at Tyler and Josh. They played with a man's dignity. Now they will rebuild it. A voice came from behind. Calm, deep, controlled, and I'll decide if they're worth keeping. The line parted. Commander Langston Ford stepped forward. Full uniform, cap low, face unreadable. Josh's mouth dried up. Tyler looked down. Ford walked right up to them. You think you've had a hard life? He asked. No reply. You think cruelty is power? Still silence. Ford pointed to his own legs, then to his heart. I carry metal in my spine, shrapnel in my liver, and ghosts in my dreams. I've buried men who never learned how to look others in the eye. And boys like you, they're the reason some of those men died. Tyler muttered, We didn't mean to. Ford snapped, You meant enough to laugh. He took a step closer. Now, you'll learn what it feels like to be the one laughed at. He turned to the sergeant. They're under my rotation. Full structure. No exemptions. The sergeant nodded once. Tyler and Josh were about to learn what that meant. Week 1. Wake up at 3 a.m. No alarm, a metal pole dragged across the bunk floor. Push-ups in dirt. Canteens filled with bitter-tasting electrolyte water. Every sir missed? 10 laps. Every eye roll? 10 burpees. Every joke whispered? 2 hours of silence, enforced by tape over the mouth and stone dragging detail. Josh tried to talk back on day 3. By day 4, he didn't speak at all. Tyler refused to clean latrines. By day 5, he was begging for a toothbrush and tile scrub. Week 2, Ford assigned them to silent meals. They sat, facing each other. One spoon, no utensils, no words. If one laughed, both skipped dinner. If one hesitated, both scrubbed trays. On day 9, Tyler broke down. I'm sorry, okay? He yelled. I was a jackass. I get it. Ford entered the mess hall. Then show it. How? Ford stepped forward. Clean the boots of every veteran in this facility. By hand. With a toothbrush. Josh looked up. You serious? Ford didn't blink. I watched you take a chair from a man who couldn't stand. Now you kneel for every man who stood when it mattered. Week 3. Letters from home arrived, except for Tyler and Josh. They'd been removed from contact. Reflection isolation, it was called. You learn who you are when no one's watching. You learn what you did when no one's defending you. Tyler started asking questions. Who was that old man? Ford finally answered. My father. Josh froze. You were there? Ford nodded. Watched everything. Heard every word. Tyler swallowed. Why didn't you stop us? Ford looked straight into his eyes. Because if I had, you'd just fear me. But now, you fear what's inside yourselves. And that's where change lives. By day 21, they stopped complaining. They started moving before orders. They stopped using, I didn't mean to. They started asking, what next? And Ford? He stopped watching them like inmates, started watching them like possibilities. Week 4. Graduation wasn't promised. It had to be granted. In a room with no audience, just steel chairs and silence, Ford stood behind a podium, looked at them, 2 boys who had learned what sweat tastes like when it comes with shame, and he said, You disrespected the wrong man. Not because he was my father, but because he was a human being. And in doing so, you showed the world who you were. A pause. But now, you've shown me who you might become. He held up 2 folded forms. Probation granted. But understand, freedom isn't forgiveness. It's a chance. And if you waste it, I'll be the last face you ever see in uniform. They stood, saluted, not for show, because they finally understood what it meant. It was raining the day the line was crossed. Not pouring, just that cold, steady drizzle that soaks through clothes and excuses alike. Tyler and Josh had skipped school again. No one was tracking them. Their parents had given up pretending they had influence. So they did what they always did, loitered. The park was mostly empty. Just damp benches, empty swings, and one figure under the oak tree. Mr. Elijah Ford. Rain dotted his knees. His wheels were muddy. A small grocery bag sat in his lap, a can of beans, a small loaf of bread, a folded newspaper. That was it. Josh squinted. Same guy from last week. Tyler tilted his head. Dude's still pushing himself around. Why don't they just put people like that somewhere inside? Josh smirked. Bet I can beat your record. Tyler raised an eyebrow. Watch. Josh jogged toward Elijah. Elijah didn't flinch. He'd seen faster things come at him. Bullets, fire, grief. Josh stood beside him, camera already rolling. Hey man, cool chair. Where'd you get it? Craigslist. No reply. Tyler followed, grinning. You need directions? Looks like you've been turning in circles since Nam. Elijah didn't move. Josh said, he don't talk. You think he's deaf? Tyler leaned in. Nah, just rude. He reached out and pushed the chair. Not forward. Not gently. Just enough to jolt the old man sideways. The wheel caught a rock. The whole thing tipped. Elijah's body hit the ground with a sickening slap. Josh laughed until he saw Elijah's face. Not fear. Not pain. Just stillness. A kind of stillness no teenager could understand. A veteran's stillness. The kind that meant, I've seen worse than you. But I'm watching you anyway. And then Elijah spoke. His voice wasn't weak. It was steel under gravel. The only reason you're still breathing is because I buried better men than you. The air went cold. Josh's phone was still filming. Tyler stepped back. Yo, chill, we were just messing around. Elijah sat up slowly. He didn't ask for help. Didn't curse. Didn't cry. He just looked at them like someone memorizing a face. You want a game? He said. They froze. I played one too. It was called Vietnam. He lifted his shirt slightly. Scar across the ribs. Thick. Roped. Another down his thigh, visible through the soaked pants. That's what bullets look like. That's what silence buys you. Josh was pale now. But Elijah wasn't finished. He pointed to the wheelchair. That chair's older than you. Held up better too. Then he looked beyond them. They turned and saw him. Langston Ford. Not in uniform. Just a dark coat. An umbrella. And a look that didn't blink. He'd seen it all. From the sidewalk. From the beginning. But he hadn't stepped in. Until now. He walked toward them, slow and direct. Not a man running to stop a fight. A man arriving at justice. Josh tried to speak. Sir, we didn't. Langston raised a hand. You've already said enough. He knelt beside his father. Checked his wrist. His shoulder. Whispered something. Elijah nodded. Then Langston stood. Turned to the boys. You didn't just push a man. You pushed history. You laughed at someone who bled for your right to laugh. And you did it on camera. Josh glanced down. The phone was still recording. Langston reached out, took it, deleted the clip, then placed it on the bench beside him, and said, You have two choices. 1. Finish high school. Pretend this never happened. Go to college. Fake maturity. Lie about what kind of men you really are. A beat. Or 2. Come with me. Learn what real power feels like. Sweat beside people you once spat on. Answer to me. And maybe walk out of a human. The boys didn't reply. Langston stepped closer. Whispered, You will regret today. The only question is how. A week later, they chose option 2. They thought it'd be simple. A few drills. Some cleaning. A slap on the wrist. They didn't know they'd be stripped of identity, pushed to physical collapse, denied comfort, and commanded by the very man whose father they had humiliated. They didn't know they'd scrub boots, or carry sandbags until their fingers bled, or be called by numbers, or run until their legs gave out, and then run again. But most of all, they didn't know they'd remember his face, Elijah's, every time they sat in silence at night alone with shame. Because that was the moment the line was crossed, not when the chair tipped, but when the man on the ground looked up and didn't need revenge. Just witnesses. And Langston? He was the witness that changed their lives forever. They thought it was just another inspection, lined up at 0500 hours. Boots shined, back straight, faces blank. Josh's knuckles were raw. Tyler's back still ached from the night ruck run. They'd gone 3 days without their voices cracking, a new record. But today, something fell off. There were no barked orders, no cold drills, only silence. Then the door opened. It wasn't Staff Sergeant Duke who stepped through. It was him, Commander Langston Ford, but not in black civilian clothes, not in training fatigues, in full dress uniform. Stars, bars, polished brass, a wall of decorated history in motion. And behind him, 3 high-ranking officers from the Pentagon, 1 civilian in a gray suit holding a leather binder, and a camera crew. Official. Josh leaned to whisper, "Is this?" "Shut up," Tyler hissed. Commander Ford stepped onto the concrete platform. His eyes scanned the row, not with disdain, with calculation, like he was measuring a ledger that had yet to be balanced. Then, finally, he spoke. "You thought this was a punishment. You thought being here was the cost of a mistake." He stepped down, walked slowly in front of the line. "But this isn't where mistakes are punished. This is where men are made accountable." He stopped in front of Josh. "You mocked a man with no legs. Now you run every morning on yours until they collapse." In front of Tyler. "You touched a symbol you didn't understand. Now you wake up every day wearing one on your chest." They looked down at the insignia, just a single patch. Civic Integrity Unit. Property of U.S. Training Division. Langston turned to face the group. "Behind me are officers who command drone fleets, nuclear briefings, and troop deployments. But none of them matter in the real world if the people walking your streets don't know what decency feels like." He raised a hand. The gray-suited man stepped forward, opened the binder, read aloud, "Effective today, by joint order of the Department of Defense and Office of Civil Reintegration, Cadets Joshua Milner and Tyler Carr will enter Phase 2, Live Deployment Cohort. Status, active restricted. Supervision, direct chain of command under Commander Langston Ford." Josh blinked. "Wait, what?" Langston turned, voice steady. "You're coming with me." Tyler's stomach dropped. "Where?" Langston's eyes didn't move. "To meet the man whose name you never asked." The transport truck left the base an hour later. Destination, Wilmington Veterans Housing Unit. Neither Josh nor Tyler spoke. Ford said nothing either. Until they pulled up to the red brick building. He led them through the side entrance. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and memory. Each room they passed had a plaque. Private Thomas, CPL Diaz, SGD H. Lee. Finally, room 104. Elijah's room. The door was open. He sat at the window, back straight, folding paper cranes. His hands were slow, but not weak. He looked over his shoulder, saw them, and said, simply, "So, they made it." Langston nodded. "No more simulations," he said. "This is your field deployment." Josh shifted. "What does that mean?" Ford replied, calm. "You'll be here 5 days a week. Washing, feeding, cleaning, listening." Tyler blinked. "What, like caregivers?" "No, like students. Because every man in this building survived something that would have broken you." Elijah turned, set the crane on the table, looked at Josh. "You still think pain is funny?" Josh looked down. "No, sir." Elijah looked at Tyler. "You still think silence means weakness?" Tyler whispered, "No, sir." Elijah didn't smile, didn't forgive, just nodded. "Then grab a broom. You start with the mess on the floor. Then we'll get to the one inside you." Over the next weeks, the assignment didn't get easier. It got harder. Not physically, emotionally. They learned how to turn veterans in bed who screamed in their sleep. They watched men cry over soup, not because it was bad, but because no one had made them any in months. They heard stories of limbs lost, of letters never sent, of medals shoved into drawers to forget what they cost. And slowly, Josh stopped reaching for his phone. Tyler started asking real questions, like, what was it like coming home? Did people ever say thank you? Do you still dream about it? Elijah rarely answered with words. He'd just hand them another crane to fold. Talk less. Listen more. One night, after a long shift, Josh found Langston outside, sitting alone. No rank, no command, just a man in silence. Josh approached, sat without asking. "I didn't know your dad was like that." Langston didn't look at him. Like what? Josh hesitated. Like important. Langston smiled barely. He's not important because of what he survived. He's important because he never gave up his dignity, even when the world tried to strip it. Josh stared ahead, then said, I think I finally get what you meant, about consequences being quieter than punishment. Langston looked at him now. Good, because the loudest shame is the one that only you hear. Graduation day came. No stage, no flags, just the veterans lined up on the porch. Elijah stood at the front. In his lap, 2 folded flags. He handed one to Tyler, one to Josh. You wore that uniform for 4 weeks. I wore mine for 40 years. Keep it clean, even if you never wear it again. Langston approached. No salute, just presence. You're done here. Tyler exhaled. So, we're free. Langston nodded. Free to do better. Or repeat everything. He turned to leave. Josh called out, Sir. Langston paused. Josh's voice cracked. We'll never be who we were again. Langston didn't turn. Then it worked. Outside, the sun rose behind them. No audience. No applause. Just 2 boys. And a door they never expected to walk through. Now forever changed by the one who held it open. It was a warm Thursday when the emails hit inboxes. Subject line, Incident Review, Lions Park Assault, Command Inquiry Scheduled. Most didn't open it. They already knew, or thought they did. Just a couple of dumb kids. Just another old man. Just another video no one stopped to watch. But now the inquiry was mandatory, and seated at the head of the review panel was a name that made everyone straighten their backs when they read it. Commander Langston E. Ford, U.S. Department of Defense, Joint Command Behavioral Reform Division. The hearing was held in a town hall room at the Civic Center. Not in uniform, not under military flag, just rows of metal chairs, a microphone, and 4 folding tables. Ford didn't bring a lawyer, didn't need one. He brought documents and a file labeled Evidence Systemic Enabling. The mayor arrived first, then the school superintendent, then the head of the Parks Department, and finally the city's civilian security liaison, the man whose officers had failed to respond to the incident. They all looked tense. None looked ready. Ford began with no introduction, no clearing of throat, no thank you for coming. He simply stood, pressed play, on a TV. A silent clip rolled. Tyler and Josh. The wheelchair. The shove. The laughter. The spin. No audio, but it didn't need any. The image said enough. Then it cut to footage from a nearby security camera. Same timestamp. 5 adults walking past. 3 looked. 1 laughed. None stopped. Ford turned off the TV. Faced the room. This happened in 23 seconds. But the permission to do it was built over years. He placed a folder on the table. Let's start with your school. The superintendent stiffened. Ford opened the first page. Tyler Carr suspended twice. 1 for harassment, 1 for filming an assault in gym class. Both times, recommendations for behavior counseling were denied due to budget cuts. Josh Milner, removed from drama program for mocking a disabled student. No formal record logged. Incident labeled peer conflict. The teacher who reported it, placed on leave the next semester. The superintendent cleared his throat. We have protocols, sir, but there are constraints. Ford didn't raise his voice, didn't cut him off, just said, children don't invent cruelty. They practice what's allowed, and you gave them permission through indifference. He turned to the mayor. Your office funded new benches in Lions Park, correct? Yes, sir. And removed the only on-site patrol unit due to low incident rate? Correct. Ford slid another paper forward. A month before this assault, a maintenance worker filed a complaint that teens were harassing older residents. No investigation. No follow-up. The mayor looked down. Ford didn't blink. When public space is left unmanaged, it becomes private territory for whoever's bold enough to claim it. That day, it belonged to 2 boys with phones. And a city that forgot presence is protection. He turned to the last man, the security liaison. Your officers weren't dispatched? No call came in. Ford opened the final folder, then paused, stared directly at him. Do you know what really bothers me? The man didn't answer. Ford continued. You didn't fail to act. You failed to look. No one in your department reviewed the footage until I filed a federal request. A long silence. Ford lowered his tone. Not out of mercy, out of finality. My father sat in the rain, bleeding from his shoulder, while half this city looked the other way. And when someone finally asked if he needed help, you know what he said? He looked at all of them now. He said, no, they need it more than I do. No one moved. No one defended. Ford stood a moment longer, then placed one final envelope on the center table. This is a full report of recommendations, disciplinary, procedural, cultural. You have 30 days to respond with implementation plans, or I escalate it federally. The mayor stood. We understand. We'll cooperate fully. Ford looked at him one last time. Make sure you don't cooperate quietly, because silence is what got you here. And then he left. That night, a reporter caught up with him in the parking lot, asked for a quote. Ford stopped, turned, said one sentence. You don't fix broken systems by yelling at the pieces. You name the hand that dropped them. And kept walking. The next morning, Elijah sat on his porch. Same chair, same calm. Langston joined him, brought 2 coffees. No sugar, just how Elijah liked it. Elijah sipped, didn't speak, then finally said, You didn't have to do that. Langston replied, Yeah, I did. A pause. Then Elijah nodded. You get them to change? Langston smiled slightly. No, I made it impossible not to. They sat in silence, father and son, one in a chair because of war, one in command because he never forgot what war looks like, even when it's quiet. The press release was short, just 3 sentences. Following an internal review, the City of Wilmington will implement a revised community conduct accountability program, increase patrol presence in public parks, and establish a task force on ethical youth engagement. Most people scrolled past it, except the ones who knew, except the ones who had been Elijah Ford. The first call didn't come from a lawyer or a teacher. It came from a janitor, Washington Middle School. He didn't work in admin, didn't teach, didn't have a Twitter, but he had seen Tyler and Josh before. He remembered the way they shoved cafeteria chairs into each other like weapons. He remembered reporting it and being told, they're just high-energy kids. Boys will be boys. He left a voicemail on the city tip line. I saw those kids. I said something. Nobody listened. I ain't staying quiet no more. Then came the gym teacher, retired now, mid-60s, living in Ohio. He emailed Langston Ford directly. I taught one of those boys. Sent in a report when he mocked a disabled classmate. It got buried. I'm ready to testify if you're building something from this. He was. Langston didn't send a thank you. He just filed it into a folder labeled Witnesses, Heard Too Late. Within 10 days, the folder had 28 entries. A crossing guard who'd seen Josh kick over a homeless man's cup in 9th grade. A former guidance counselor told to stop chasing problems after she flagged Tyler's escalating behavior. A fast food worker who served them the night before the attack watched them throw fries at a woman's child and had no idea who to report it to. One by one, the wall cracked, and the stories poured in. Langston didn't reply to every email. He didn't go on interviews. He didn't do press. He just forwarded every message to his team and started a new policy draft. MALS, Mandatory Accountability Logging System. It didn't replace legal complaints. It tracked verbal flags, informal warnings, gut-level unease. He did it again. This feels wrong. I know it's not criminal, but it's not nothing. These whispers became the new data because what happened to his father didn't start with violence. It started with permission. Meanwhile, something shifted in the schools. Kids began to ask different questions. If I say something now, will someone actually hear it? Do adults only care if it makes the news? Why do some people get 10 chances and others get expelled on the first strike? Teachers didn't always have the answers. But for once, they had an example. They had a name. Commander Ford. Not a hero. A mirror. In youth centers, programs adjusted overnight. New conflict resolution modules. Open floor sessions with anonymous confession walls. Peer accountability teams, not to punish, but to interrupt patterns before they turned into damage. It wasn't perfect, but it was visible. At the hospital, Elijah heard about it secondhand, from a nurse, then a volunteer, then from the vet in room 302, who said, "Your son made our city nervous." Elijah just smiled. That's his job. But one afternoon, he asked the nurse for a laptop. Typed one sentence in a Word doc. They think silence keeps them safe, but it just keeps them asleep. He emailed it to Langston with no subject line. Langston printed it, taped it to his war room wall. Then something else happened. People who had power began to speak. A former city planner who fought for a youth equity clause but was overruled. She called the mayor's office, again. This time, they answered. A school board rep, who once looked the other way during a racism complaint. He requested to be moved to the new ethics task force, and showed up, not to speak, to listen. Langston wasn't surprised. People act like courage is contagious, but he knew better. What's contagious is relief. Relief that someone else went first. Relief that now, finally, it might be safe to say what they swallowed for years. He didn't hold it against them. He just documented it. By the end of the month, the Office of Civil Youth Affairs released a new tool, a public, opt-in database of pattern reports, anonymous staff, educators, community leaders tracking red flags across programs. It wasn't about shame. It was about early intervention, and in the first 72 hours, 112 flags were logged. At a press briefing, a reporter asked Langston, "Sir, what do you say to people who think this is too little, too late?" He looked her dead in the eye and said, "I say it's not for you to feel better. It's for the next kid who's about to get hit and thinks no one's watching." That weekend, Langston visited a juvenile diversion camp, the same one Tyler and Josh had trained through, not to check in, to listen. He sat across from a 15-year-old who said, "I used to make fun of people like your dad, but now I clean the boots of men like him. I hate who I was, but I think I like who I'm trying to be." Langston didn't say much, just nodded, then don't stop trying. That night, as he packed up to leave, he passed a bulletin board in the camp's main hall. On it, pinned in the center, a quote handwritten in pencil. "We don't fix what we don't face, and we don't face what we're too proud to admit." Langston stared at it a long time, then added a small sticky note under it. It read, "Now we know better, so do better," and walked out into the dark. The table was long, too long for one man, but Langston Ford sat at the head of it anyway. Quiet, jacket off, sleeves rolled. No press, no audience, no flag behind him, just policy drafts, legal pads, and a fountain pen older than his commission. Across the table sat his team, military consultants, civilian reform analysts, 2 school administrators, and a social worker from the city youth program. Nobody was smiling, because this wasn't a celebration. This was a reckoning, in writing, and Langston was ready to sign. He started with the smallest form. City Resolution 118, A. Title, School Response Transparency Act. Clause 1. All behavioral incident reports must be reviewed by a minimum of 3 cross-departmental staff before being closed. Clause 2. Informal warnings must be tracked and visible to guardians upon request. Clause 3. Any suppression of behavioral records without cause will result in immediate review by an independent panel. He read it once more, then signed, not with pride, with precision. Next, Civic Ethics and Integrity Guidelines, Addendum 4. This one was personal. It mandated that any report involving a disabled individual as victim or witness be reviewed by a representative who shares lived experience. Nothing about us without us, the clause read. Langston stared at those words for a long time. He thought of his father, of the chair that hit concrete, of the silence that followed. Then he signed, carefully, deliberately. The next document was thicker, not reactive, foundational. Community Equity Implementation Framework, Phase 1. It called for funding, but not for fences or patrol cars. 4. A long-term peer mentorship programs led by trauma-informed counselors, embedded restorative justice training in grades 6 through 12, anonymous staff reporting pathways with third-party oversight. Langston signed that one with a deeper stroke, then slid it across the table. "No one here is clapping," he said. "Good, because this isn't theater. This is infrastructure." Someone nodded. Another whispered, "About time." Langston didn't look up. He was already opening the next folder. Outside the window, the city moved as usual. Car horns, buses, children laughing as they left school. But inside the room, every sound felt like a footnote to a truth they'd all avoided too long. Justice isn't what happens after wrong. It's what prevents it before it happens again. And Langston was here for prevention, not performance. An hour later, the meeting ended. Everyone left quietly. Langston stayed behind, organized the folders, one by one, then pulled out an envelope he hadn't opened yet. It had arrived that morning, no return address. He unfolded the letter. It read, "I was the teacher who looked away. I saw him fall. I saw them laugh. And I walked away. I didn't know who he was. That shouldn't matter. I'll never do that again." Langston stared at it, folded it, filed it into a binder labeled, "Witnesses now awake." That evening, Langston returned to the Veterans Center. His father, Elijah, was on the back patio, the sun low, the air still. Langston sat beside him, didn't speak. Elijah sipped iced tea, then, without turning, asked, "You do it?" Langston nodded. "All of it? All that matters for now." Elijah exhaled. "They'll forget again, you know." "I know. And you'll have to remind them again." Langston smiled. "I will." A pause. Then Elijah said, "That's not justice. That's work." Langston looked out toward the horizon. Justice is work. And they sat in silence. Two generations who'd seen the same patterns, but refused to let them stay. The next morning, Langston received a call. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't political. It was a school counselor from the West Side. She said, "We're rewriting our entire orientation manual. The kids said they wanted your father's name included. Not because he's a war vet, because he survived something they all recognized." Langston didn't ask what that was. He already knew. The story never went viral. No Netflix deal. No book tour. But something shifted. And stayed. In the files. In the funding. In the fact that now, when someone filed a complaint, it didn't vanish. It echoed. Because justice wasn't a press release. It was a system of receipts. And Langston Ford? He had kept them all. It didn't start with headlines. It started with a hallway. At Southgate High School, a student named Malik read a line from a policy update posted on the office door. "All verbal and informal reports regarding discriminatory behavior will now be documented and addressed within 24 hours. He didn't say anything out loud. He just took a photo of it, sent it to his older cousin in another district with one line, "They're doing it. For real." At a community center in Atlanta, a youth coordinator read the new national memo from the Department of Civic Engagement. Cities implementing the MALS framework have reduced escalated youth incidents by 43% within 6 months. She printed the memo, taped it to the front desk, wrote in red marker, "Ask, speak, be heard." 2 boys asked if it was that Commander Ford thing. She nodded. They nodded back, didn't smile, but didn't look away. Across the country, colleges began quoting him, not on websites, but in training binders. Silence is not safety. It's just a softer form of surrender. One RA taped it inside a dorm elevator. Another used it as the theme for their conflict mediation orientation. A third whispered it in a room full of freshmen who thought reporting a slur would make them a problem. At a detention center in Arizona, a teenage girl wrote an essay. It was titled, "The First Time I Believed Adults Could Change." She'd never met Ford, but she wrote about the hearing, the reforms, the idea that someone in power had said, out loud, that harm isn't just what hurts the body, it's what convinces you nobody cares. Her final line read, "If justice is work, then I want to work too." Her counselor submitted it to a national youth publication. They published it, and the next week, 7 more essays came in. Same theme, same ripple. Meanwhile, in Wilmington, life went on. The park got a new sign. Not a plaque, not marble, just wood, sanded and sealed. Engraved, "This space was once ignored. Now it is watched. Now it is shared." No name attached, but everyone knew who made that happen. Elijah Ford saw the sign one morning on his routine roll. He paused, looked at it, then looked around. Kids were playing, dogs barking. A couple sat on the bench, once stained by silence. He didn't cry, didn't post it, just sat, until one boy ran by, stopped short, and said, "You're the man from the story, right?" Elijah blinked. "Which story?" The boy grinned. "The one where nobody helped you, but your son changed everything." Elijah smiled, soft. "No," he said, "the one where people started helping each other." The boy thought about that, then ran off. Langston didn't know about the sign until days later. He was reviewing MLS implementation reports when a photo came through on his phone. No caption, just the sign, just his father's silhouette next to it. Langston exhaled, closed the report, and took a long walk with no destination, because sometimes the echo hits long after the noise stops. At the Capitol, a senator referenced the Wilmington case during a hearing on national youth policy. Langston's name wasn't mentioned, but the phrase "ethics without enforcement is just optics" was quoted directly. It made the room pause, not because it was new, because it was true. One afternoon, a young man in fatigues waited outside the civic reintegration base. He wasn't there for intake. He wasn't being processed. He was returning. It was Josh, no longer boy-faced. He waited in silence until Langston exited the building. They stood facing each other. Langston didn't speak first. Josh said, "I'm deploying next spring. Civil Support Unit. Voluntary. I didn't come to thank you. I came to say, I'm going to be the one who notices next time, and that's because of you." Langston nodded and replied, "Then it worked." Back in the city, a new public mural was painted across the side of the recreation center. It wasn't of Langston. It was a wheelchair painted in gold, and above it, you thought he was just a man in a chair. You forgot chairs roll, and some of them roll into history. People stopped, took photos. Some asked who did it. No one knew. That was the point. Because justice isn't about the signature. It's about the signature moves on people. The final echo wasn't loud. It came one night as Langston visited his father, who was folding paper cranes again. Elijah asked, "You still angry at the world, boy?" Langston said nothing. Then, not angry, just unwilling to accept quiet as a solution. Elijah nodded. "Good. You shouldn't." He handed Langston a crane, the last one, on its wing, written in fine black ink. Not a symbol, a reminder. Langston placed it on the windowsill. No ceremony, no camera, just sunlight filtering through its paper wings. And the quiet that finally, didn't mean silence. The first knock came just after dusk. Langston was cleaning out an old file cabinet in the civic office, finalizing transfer documents, organizing ethics committee drafts. He expected a delivery, or another staffer. Instead, it was the mayor. No press behind him, no assistant, just him, holding a worn folder. Langston didn't invite him in, didn't need to. The mayor stepped inside anyway, set the folder on the table. "This is from 2016, a community report about youth on elder harassment in the Northeast Quadrant. The recommendation was to add 1 patrol shift. I vetoed it." Langston stared at the file, didn't touch it. The mayor went on. "I thought it was overreacting. I thought we didn't have the resources. I thought it would never get that bad." He looked up, and for once, there was no gloss in his voice. "Then I saw your father on the ground, and I realized it already was that bad." Langston didn't nod, didn't speak. The mayor continued, "I can't undo what I signed, but I can make sure no one ever signs silence again." He opened the folder. Inside was a single-type document, City Charter Addendum Proposal, Bystander Intervention Infrastructure Act. Langston read it. No praise, just one word. Submit. 2 days later, the school superintendent requested a closed-door meeting. She arrived early, wore no makeup, no pin, carried no laptop. Langston offered no coffee. She didn't ask for any. She sat, opened a small notepad, read aloud. I ignored 4 reports that mentioned Tyler Carr by name. I called them contextual. I let a student with behavioral red flags slip past 22 faculty members because I was more afraid of overreacting than being right. She closed the notebook. I have tenure, but I'm resigning. Not because of pressure, because I finally understood what kind of adult I'd become. Langston didn't argue, didn't comfort, just said, make room for someone who listens faster. That same week, Langston received a handwritten letter. No return address. Neat cursive. Inside, I was one of the people who walked by that day. I saw your father. I saw the boys. And I told myself, it's not my business. I didn't intervene. I didn't call. I didn't even pause. It wasn't because I agreed. It was because I thought someone else would do something. The last line read, no one did, and that's on me. Langston folded the letter, filed it next to the others. Reckonings, unsolicited. It was the thickest file in the drawer. Then came Josh. Older now, face a little leaner, posture different. He waited outside the civic building after dark, hands in pockets. Langston stepped out. They didn't shake hands. Josh didn't ask to talk. He just started. I wrote my father a letter. Told him everything. Told him I wasn't asking for approval, just accountability. Langston listened. Josh continued. He said I embarrassed him. And for once, I agreed. Langston nodded. Did it change him? Josh looked down. I don't think so. But it changed how I look at him. Langston studied him. Sometimes that's the real reckoning. Not changing them. Just deciding you won't be them. Josh looked him in the eye. That's why I came. Then he left. Didn't ask for forgiveness. Didn't pretend to be healed. Just showed up. And that was enough. One morning, Elijah sat outside the center, same chair, same blanket. A nurse walked by, paused. Mr. Ford? Yes. I was working that week. She sat next to him. I saw the bruises on your side. I thought someone would report it. I thought I wasn't high enough in the system to escalate it. I thought if I said something, I'd just get in the way. Elijah looked at her, calm. And now? She swallowed. Now, I know I was part of the silence. He nodded, didn't smile. Then don't be next time. She blinked back tears, then stood. I won't. And walked back inside. At a small youth summit hosted at the recreation center, a teenage girl stepped up to the mic. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. When I saw what happened to Mr. Ford, I asked myself, would I have done the same thing as those boys? She paused. Everyone in the room held their breath. And I realized maybe not the same, but maybe I wouldn't have stopped it. And that scared me. She looked straight at the crowd. So I made a list of 5 people I've seen be mistreated and said nothing. I went back and apologized to every one of them. Silence. Then applause. Not loud, but earned. Langston watched from the back. Didn't clap. Just closed his notebook. Because that was the future folding in real time. Back at home, Langston sat with his father. Late night. No lights on. Just the glow of the TV and 2 cups of warm tea. Elijah turned, finally asked, you think they really mean it? The ones who came back. Langston didn't answer right away. Then, some do. Some won't. But they're facing it. And that's more than most. Elijah sipped. You think that's enough? Langston shrugged. It's enough for me to keep going. They didn't say anything else that night. But in the quiet, something new sat between them. Not hurt. Not regret. Just reckoning. And the understanding that even after justice, the work stays. The old storage room hadn't changed. Same dull paint. Same scuff floor. Same hum of the flickering light above. Langston stood in the doorway, key in hand. He hadn't returned here since the day his father was knocked from his chair. But today, no one had to tell him to come. It was just time. Inside, the room was clean now, organized, shelves labeled, supplies boxed neatly, a folding stretcher against the wall. But Langston didn't care about any of that. He cared about the square tile by the back wall, still faintly cracked, still where his father's elbow hit first. He walked over, knelt beside it, ran his hand over the fracture, closed his eyes, then reached into his pocket, pulled out a small bronze plaque. No fancy font, just 5 words. This space remembers who fell. He screwed it into the wall himself. No drill, no announcement. Then stood and walked out without looking back. At the civic office, a box sat on his desk. It wasn't large, just old. Inside, every paper crane Elijah had ever folded. Langston lifted one gently, turned it over. On the bottom, in faded black ink. Quiet doesn't mean invisible. He nodded, then carried the box to the city archive room, asked for it to be preserved under the new civic education exhibit. Not as art, as evidence. The park near the Veterans Center got one final edition. Not a camera, not a patrol booth, just a bench. Simple, wide, smooth grain wood, etched into the seat. You're seen. Sit anyway. It didn't bear Langston's name, but when people sat, they somehow understood. This was a place that used to mean danger. Now it meant presence, and sometimes that was enough. Langston's final act in office wasn't a speech. It was a transfer, a quiet reassignment to National Civilian Ethics Strategy Development. No badge, no title higher than before, but the influence to rewire 1,000 small things that prevent big disasters. He packed his office himself. No assistant, no goodbye email, just one folded sticky note left behind on the inside of his desk drawer. It read, "If you're reading this, you found the chair. Now build the room that belongs around it." The last person to see him before he left Wilmington wasn't a mayor or a veteran. It was Malik, the student who first snapped the photo of the new school policy. He'd asked to meet in the park. Sat on the new bench, nervous. Langston joined him. Didn't speak. Malik did. "I didn't think people like us could change anything." Langston looked at him. "Most of the time, we can't change the past. But we can trap it, so it can't repeat itself." Malik blinked. "Like a cage?" Langston shook his head. "No, like a mirror. So the next person sees their reflection before they make the choice." Malik nodded, then said, "I think I want to work in city planning. Make parks safer, streets smarter. I want people to stay, like your dad did." Langston smiled, didn't reply, just stood. "Then you already started." Back at the Veterans Center, Elijah rolled to his usual window. But this time, something was different. He opened his drawer. Inside, his old VA ID badge, folded letters, and a laminated article. He pulled one photo out, the mural, the golden wheelchair. He stared at it a long time, then took a pen, wrote on the back. "They didn't erase me. They just delayed seeing me." He placed it on the table, didn't file it, didn't hide it, let it stay visible, just like he always should have been. Langston's final visit before leaving town was to the youth cohort at the reintegration camp. New faces now, young, restless, still learning. He didn't give orders. He just said, "Justice doesn't end when the paperwork's filed. It ends when you stop needing me to remind you who you are." He looked at the boys in the front row, recognized the weight behind their eyes. Some weren't ready. Some were almost there. One raised his hand. "Sir, how do we know when we've changed?" Langston smiled. "When you don't need to ask that anymore." That night, he packed light, left most things behind. Just a duffel bag, a notebook, his father's crane, the one with the ink still legible. The drive out of town was quiet. No ceremony, no goodbye wave, but the final streetlight before the highway had been updated. Below it hung a sign, "This city doesn't wait for tragedy anymore. We interrupt it, together." Langston read it once, then turned onto the road, into the dark, into whatever came next. Because sometimes, closure doesn't mean a happy ending. It means knowing the silence isn't empty anymore. It holds names, cracks, witnesses, and one chair no one can ignore again.